This is the Journey to Local panel. Thanks everybody for sticking around, coming back in. I'm Claire Burton. I'm on the kitchen management team at Central Pizza and Bar in downtown Lafayette. Prior to that, had some experience with a farm-to-table restaurant for many years and developed some great relationships, and we need to work on growing those more. With that said, we've got Allison with Fullness Farm today, Ms. Margie with Fat River Farm, Allison with the CLEDA, that's the Central Louisiana Economic Development Authority, and then Jamie and Kelsey with Scratch Farm Kitchen will be representing the restaurant industry in Lafayette. Ladies, if you want to tell us about yourselves a little bit.
Us?
Yeah.
Talk about ourselves.
Talk about Scratch Farm Kitchen, just very briefly, a couple of sentences.
Okay. I always get here and I feel like everybody's heard the story already, but maybe that's just my issue. Kelsey and I started as a farmer. I kind of still am. Want to be again one day. Met Kelsey. She was a chef at St. Street Inn. She started helping me raise pigs. We started feeding people. We got a food truck. And now we decided to move over into a brick and mortar location in downtown Lafayette. We're not open yet, working on it. And our passion is just to bring good local food to people as much as we can, as much as the growers can grow, as much as we can find, as much as we can support those local growers. We believe in keeping those relationships strong and supportive and keeping that web just tight. Yeah.
I'm Allison Tomei with CLEDA. You just heard John talk about our organization as a whole. My job is the Director of Regional Farmers Market Development for the Central Louisiana region. So my role is to strengthen our network of farmers markets. So I connect with all of our existing markets in the different parishes that we serve and find out what's working, what's not, and just connect them to resources to help them grow. So a lot of what I do is working specifically with market managers to build their capacity and help them implement best practices. But from a big picture, the way I see my work is partly increasing access to healthy foods for residents of Central Louisiana. And then the flip side of that is that I'm trying to help our farmers and small businesses increase their income. This is ours.
Hi, I'm Margie Green, and I am a farmer with Fat River Farms, but I'm also a nonprofit executive director with Sprout NOLA, and so what we do is we provide technical assistance and wraparound services to farmers, mostly in the greater New Orleans area, but also regionally in South Louisiana. What I mean by that is that we, as an organization that started as farmers, we realized that there were a lot of challenges to starting and growing a successful and specifically a sustainable farm business, and so we sort of started identifying gaps and barriers that we were seeing people repeatedly meeting, and that's mostly urban and peri-urban farms that we're working with, but we were seeing the same challenges over and over again. So we sort of started as a grassroots organization, just helping farmers come together and talk about their challenges and then finding ways as a group to address them. And we realized that that was more than a full-time job. And so all of the sort of founding staff of Sprout is also farmers. But what we do during our day job is we try to build power among farmers to try to repair our food system from a producer focus. We find that a lot of people work on food access as part of the food chain, and that's incredibly important. But in order to have a sustainable food system in South Louisiana, we also realize that we have to do a lot of farmer development. So, excuse me, I'm losing my voice a little if you can't tell. But that's what we focus on, and we're really excited to see our community of farmers grow. And we're really excited to produce opportunities for them and work with them and in community to find new farmers.
I'm Allison Guidros with my husband Grant. We operate Fullness Farm, which is in Baton Rouge. We're a really small, intensive farm. We're at 1.5 acres now, but we started with 1/2 acre for the first 2 years. I have a daughter. We have a daughter too. And I just recently went back to LSU to get my master's degree in horticulture, focusing on soil health. So that's also an interest of mine. We sell directly to consumers through a farmer's market, the Red Stick Farmers Market. That's how we started, and with a few restaurants that really got it, and we've kind of added on restaurants as they've found out about us. And then we also have a CSA, which stands for Community Supported Agriculture, and this is our 3rd season doing that. So that's my story.
Kelsey, what do you identify as some of the challenges in connecting with small local farms? Do you see any challenges there?
Some challenges would be that, well, there are a few challenges that are different. Some farms don't want to sell to restaurants. Some are wanting us to go to them more than they're wanting to branch out and make connections with restaurateurs in any capacity. Some are just very elusive and random. People that'll show up at your back door, you'll never see them again, and they'll give you mushrooms or random vegetables, herbs, and that's kind of how I feel like we've collected food from the beginning, back of truck kind of thing, backdoor deals. As far as the farms that are standing, such as Covey Rise and any of the larger farms, Inglewood, they'll come to us after the market and ask if we want anything that they have left. They'll call us. Sometimes we have to call them. I guess it's just a lot of communication, extra communication. But it works if you stick at it. Definitely worth it.
Could we hear from one of our farmers about some of the difficulty in, you'd mentioned, Allison, that some restaurants in Baton Rouge get it. What's entailed in the getting of it?
Yeah, So to kind of understand the challenges is just to understand that there are challenges is a breakthrough. You know, understand that it's not like we're not just going and picking off produce off of a shelf, and we're dealing with elements and all that kind of stuff. When we just like look for a restaurant, we kind of go for the chef owners, because then the chefs are making those purchasing decisions. We like and we've seen it with our customers too, that everybody's just becoming more educated, and so a lot of times they're coming to us and telling us why it's so great. It's less of us having to convince them about it, and I think just the understanding that we have challenges outside of our control is a big thing, and understanding on both sides to not. We always try to under-promise and over-deliver. It's easy to over-promise and under-deliver. And I think for the chef, too, if they've got that same kind of approach, it really helps out. And just that willingness to do something different, you know, with the communication. Like, we typically send out a text with our availability, whereas a lot of the chefs are just used to, like, you can go online any day, order any day, it'll be there the next day. And so that willingness to kind of do a different thing than what's in their typical routine is huge for us.
I also want to add that most of this type of procuring any type of farm-raised product, there's a lot of bartering going on. So it's not where you go and there's a price and you get your item. You go and you talk to someone. They might say, just give me food later, and I'll give you all this corn. Or give me this and I'll give you that, and then the next week they might want a bunch of money, and then but the other person might not. So it's definitely a different beast, and it's super fun if you get the hang of it.
I get a sense that that's very different than the restaurants that we sell to. So right now I don't sell directly to restaurants, but I did for 8 years, and in New Orleans, which is where I'm located, I don't know if I even said that. In New Orleans, where I'm located, one of the biggest challenges is that we have a lot of traditional menus and high-end restaurants that are, I think, some of the most brilliant chefs, and they're really wonderful minds, and they're really talented, and people come from all over the country to eat their food, yet we find an unwillingness to adapt certain menu items. And it's interesting to me because those menu items were built off of seasonality to begin with. So when we look at our cultural cuisine here in Louisiana, one of the things that we know is we're really proud of it, but it also developed with people and with seasons. So the fact that we're unwilling to change what's in a gumbo des herbes in the middle of the summer seems a little bit silly to me. And one of the things that we point out in New Orleans is that we are, and I think Lafayette is very similar, like we're one of the main food cuisines of America, and yet we use almost zero local food in New Orleans. I would say the percentage of local food that we use in restaurants is probably close enough to zero that it's fair to say that. Yeah, I would guess it's actually probably more like 5 or 6%, which is negligible. So I think that there's a lot of give that farmers need to do in implementing systems that work for chefs. And like I, for years, as a farmer, was sort of standing on principle and saying that chefs needed to come to us. And I don't actually think that's true. I think that we have to be more business minded. And I think that's where nonprofits like CLETA and Sprout step in and help people adapt and make sure that there's not a barrier to the smallest farmers being able to compete and sell to restaurants. But I also think that restaurants, and it sounds like you guys are incredibly flexible, but I think that restaurants where I'm from need to be able to have a willingness to imagine an economy for their kitchen that's a little bit different and a little less easy. And that'll build a resiliency for all of our food. And so it's giving on both sides that I think we find people aren't always willing to do.
I have a sudden follow-up question. So we had talked briefly about CSAs. I'm sure a lot of us are familiar individually, family-based CSAs. It's a very cool way you get whatever's the freshest, the farmer has the most of it for a flat fee throughout the season. Is there any possibility of a future of like a restaurant CSA? Like I sign up for your season and every week I get 20 pounds of something, or, you know, a mix, or
That would be awesome.
like, you know, so the CSA for the consumer is working. Like I see a lot of farms offering the CSA, it's being sold out, you have to get it in advance. So let's see if we can take it, you know, somewhere else.
Yeah, that would be great. On the producers end, it's wonderful. It's really, you know, so you're getting money up front at the beginning of the season when you've got all your input costs going in, and then it's helpful. I mean, like, our CSA isn't big. We're a 30 member CSA this year, but we talk about like fennel. It's hard for us to move 30 fennel bulbs at the market, but it's really nice to have 30 fennel bulbs go out, and it's pre-sold, and you are getting the best of that.
Exactly.
The best of that season. So yeah, I've never heard somebody suggest that. I think that would
You
be
heard it here first, everybody. Restaurant CSAs.
You came up with that. I did want to say that like we have a couple of chefs in New Orleans who, they don't necessarily have like a CSA model, but we have chefs who are, and I can think of them and name them on my hands, but will accept like what you have when you have it, as long as you have a working relationship with them. And that has been the most supportive thing. And I will name them. It's actually Sneaky Pickle in New Orleans. Will accept literally anything. Like there's stuff on the menu that as a grower, I don't know what it is. When I go in to eat, I'm like, what? But also, we also see restaurants that have closed down because they've been so willing to work with farmers. So I think that is like, yet again, we need to patronize those places. And that's why I was like, oh yeah, I should name it. Ben Tabor at Sneaky Pickle will take anything that you ever sell. So, yeah.
So we've kind of talked a little bit about some of the challenges of sourcing and distribution and come together and had a great new idea. What are some of the next steps for young farmers, for young restaurateurs starting out? Like, what do you think can be built into like the foundation of a farm? Like, I have an idea, I want to have a farm. What would be the first thing the CLEAD would offer me as like advice?
Or a new farmer.
Yeah, as a farmer. Pretend I'm a farmer right now. I'd probably have broader shoulders.
CLETA has tremendous resources for beginning farmers and new farmers. John mentioned someone on our team. Her name is Bahia Nightingale, and she runs a beginning farmer training every year. It's a series of workshops and field days teaching you all of the basics of starting a farm-based business. Aside from that, she will work with farmers one-on-one. We offer entrepreneurship coaching. So I don't know that there's a one piece of advice that's applicable to every farmer, but connecting farmers to resources is I think the important thing, and making sure that they get whatever support they need.
And even over the 5 years that I've been involved buying local, it has gotten easier. I don't think it's as equitable for everyone as it will be one day, but like there's definite noticeable improvement. So like it's working. So I guess like a time frame is also an important thing. Like if you've been a farmer for 3 years, your personal, if you've been a chef for 3 years, your personal knowledge of the seasonality of guests coming in and out, like are people in Destin? Are they here? Are they there? Is there a football game? So you lack that depth of knowledge. So to that end, are there other, like a mentor-mentee program? Is that a thing for anybody? Because I know in the culinary industry, you just go work in a kitchen for a time and kind of learn in a mentee situation. So
Yeah.
do farmers have those kinds of?
And a farmer should take this question.
Oh,
Well,
sure.
There are a couple people in this room working on a craft network. Is that what you're shouting out? Okay.
Oh, cool. This is so timely.
And then that's something that it's starting really small. It's something that would eventually reach all parts of the state. Any farmer in this room who hasn't heard of it yet, we're coming for you, and any organization that hasn't been engaged yet, we're coming for you too. But a craft network is a collaborative regional alliance of farmer trainings, and it's a model that we see all over the country, and it is farmers training farmers and creating an actual formal apprenticeship system. And ideally, long-term, we'd be able to form a guild or a grange and look at models of things that have happened throughout history in American agriculture, and that formalization could even lead to something like a farmers union in the future, which could lead to farmers being able to get things like health insurance. So that would be great.
Awesome.
Speaking to an apprenticeship and things like that, Grant and I spent 3 years working as apprentices on farms at Inglewood and then in a farm in southern Arkansas. And especially the farm in southern Arkansas, I'd been in business for, now it's 30 years, but they started it the year I was born. And so I was like, this is who I want to learn from. If you've been doing this as long as I've been alive, I want to do it. And and they had a business. It was how they were sending their kids to college. It was how they were going on vacations. It was how, they're paying for all that. And so I think being able to be under some kind of mentor like that, when Grant and I were setting up the farm, you've got all the new things that you've got to do, like put in irrigation that you haven't done before, or all these jillion projects that you've never done. But once it got time to plant, harvest, wash, pack, deliver, we knew what we were doing. And it took a lot of the stress off. And I think there are some things that new farmers could focus on to best meet a restaurant's need. I think focus on what you want to do. Do something small and be really good at that. For us, it's baby greens, leafy greens, herbs, edible flowers. That's what we started with, and we kind of add on things as we feel comfortable. And like I said, we only started with half an acre, so we didn't start start small, really small, let a quarter of what you think you should start with. Manage it really well. Don't get overwhelmed. Don't overpromise. A market's a good place to start because people don't have expectations for you. And then once you are wanting to go to a restaurant, be as legit as you know how to be. Go with an invoice. Have a copy for you. Have a copy for them. Have your address on there so they know how to pay. Where to send the check. It's nice if you can have some type of hat, shirt, something with your logo on it. If you don't have a logo, maybe you should make a logo. Kind of try to think about what do other businesses have? What what would Apple do, or whatever company you want to pick. How would their farm be? And you can do barters, and you can do that, and there are going to be only a few people that are willing to step up and be there. But a lot of restaurants are running businesses, just like you're hopefully trying to run a business, and so that's what I would say. Like respect the business that they're trying to run as well, and contact them on the same day. Always contact them on that day. Deliver when you say you're going to deliver. Like farmers can be sketchy, and just try to be as like, because things will come up when you need to apologize that are outside of your control. So it's nice if you kind of have goodwill built in, where they're like, oh, this is just an anomaly. It's not like this isn't going to happen every week. So those are like just a few things I would think for the producer side.
I'd like to add real quick, when you establish a relationship with a restaurant, make sure they have like a high quality digital file of your logo, farm name, and on the off chance they're doing any kind of social media adding, and further get your name out there, because a lot of restaurants around here certainly do try to name, call out, shout out any local provider that they're dealing with. Does anybody have any questions? I'm going to keep going. I want to answer it.
Dealing with restaurants, they want primal cuts of beef.
Sure.
The best cuts. They don't want the rest. That's not true.
Yeah, there's just other restaurants.
Take anything.
Yeah.
If you're a great restaurant running a sustainable mission, you'd want anything.
Yeah, I think it's like finding your people. Find the people that get it.
So how many meetings?
Hang on. Please speak into the microphone.
Yes, sorry you have to listen to the back of my head. No, how many meetings like this did you come to before you figured out you could market to a restaurant?
Look.
Here we go. We got this one.
Oh, yeah, sure.
We're indebted to the apprenticeships. So like when I was in Arkansas, I was delivering to 40 restaurants on a Friday. So you know what I mean? Like for 2 years. So, and then before that we were with Inglewood, and I was going down to New Orleans and delivering, and my husband was in Baton Rouge delivering. And so, so we had, like, once we got back to Baton Rouge, we kind of knew the people to start with, and we kind of knew the back of the house kind of vibe, and like kind of challenges that you might run into with a restaurant. So yeah, we're indebted to the apprenticeships that we had. But I think at some point you just gotta try, and it kind of, you'll get hurt along the way, you'll get burned and all that kind of stuff. But restaurants have also gotten burned, which I think is an important thing to realize too. Like, farmers have let the people, that would have maybe really gone into local, and we've let them down too. So you kind of have to, just understand where they're coming from too, and don't try to win everybody. You don't have to be, you don't have to be in Ruth's Chris. You don't have to whatever. I don't know the meat world at all, but you don't have to be in the big steakhouses. Like, just start with one, or start with 2, 3, and then chefs talk, and sous chefs travel a lot. That's another tip. Make friends with the sous chef, and they'll call you if they love your product. They'll call you and say like, "Hey, I worked here, and I know your stuff's good, and I want to have it here." And once you have one, just do your best to maintain that relationship too. But you got to just start at some point.
I have another question back here.
Yes. Okay, so as I mentioned before, we do added value products. We source directly from local farmers and gardeners. We would love to work with local restaurants. The thing is, the local restaurants, most of the time, they're doing their own thing. So how can we break into the restaurant business, not being a farmer, But being a producer, that could perhaps help a restaurant maybe develop something that maybe we're better at, or we can provide.
What kind of items are you doing
We
currently?
We do jams, jellies, and preserves.
Okay, cool. Well, so in the
So-
South, I feel like obviously pepper jelly immediately jumps to mind. There are a
We do
lot of
that.
dishes that either incorporate that in vinaigrettes or on top of whatever the dish may be. But pepper jelly is certainly an item
Well, we
that I
actually
feel like a
have-
lot of restaurants would be interested in.
We're actually in a restaurant now that uses our habanero and Reaper pepper jelly, which is great.
Sure.
Because when we go, we obviously advertise them because it's a working relationship. So we just want to get into that. And because we're locally sourced, we're seasonal as well. So I really like to work with a restaurant that,
May I ask a question about that? Is there, what is the reason that you would want to work with a restaurant instead of retail?
one, I think it would be easier because there's a lot less loopholes to go through. Because if we do retail, then we have to go commercial and get our UPC and send everything to get it analyzed, get a nutritional value. So to
Master
me, it would just be
plans.
easier going restaurant just because we're funding our own company. So
operating under the cottage laws currently?
yeah, I mean, we have insurance
Sure, sure.
and we do all of that, but that is the economics of it. It's just not feasible for us to go retail.
I'm just wondering, like I think that one of the things that we find that we're challenging chefs to do as farmers is to do a lot more, like creating their own value-added products. And when I think about the economics of like what is a profit margin for a value-added product, we know that it's slim. You know that it's slim. That you're operating on, a fine margin. That I wonder if adding another step in that chain isn't a little difficult, and that maybe scaling to a really big size would make sense and distributing in that sense, but that most of the best chefs that I know who have done a really good job of buying local food, the way that they save money is making that kind of stuff in-house and making it with scraps. And I mean, I'm sure there's a way, and I'm not meaning to poo-poo your model.
Well, I know it's very hard because the restaurants do their own thing. The reason we're in this restaurant is because my product is better than theirs. And I realize I'm competing against renowned chefs. I'm not going to deny that. But, to go retail, we have to distribute. But if you're using my product in your restaurant, you're using it. You're giving people ideas on how to use it. So it could just be one product. It wouldn't have to be my whole line. So how could we convey that possibly, even seasonal? Because I do simple syrups as well. So, right. Okay.
Okay, so one example would be for like a dessert pizza. We have a margarita jam
Sure.
to make a dessert pizza out of that. So it's just a pitch. It's just to meet people and start pitching it. I think that's our solution.
It's just
You
like,
got to pitch.
yeah,
Yes.
it's just like a
Right.
farmer getting in front of a chef to pitch their raw product. You just have
Yeah.
to do the same thing. You have to be creative about marketing.
And I'll challenge, like, retail, when you're doing a market, like if you're not necessarily trying to be distributed at a grocery store where your product margin is going to be even thinner. I know that there is a time issue with going to market. I know that there's a labor issue with going to market, but I would challenge you to go to market as retail, because then, I mean, I think if you could make a good business doing multiple markets, and you wouldn't actually need to send off for testing. You would be able to do that in a commercial kitchen. And I think your profit margin would be a lot higher that way.
Hey, it's me again. So my family's been distributing food since 1952 here in Lafayette in Acadiana. And I started a cold pressed juice company a few years ago that was actually sourcing exclusively local at the farmer's market. That became extremely difficult to do, as we're seeing here. So one of the things and the reason I do what I do now is to try and relieve that barrier. And one of the ways we do it is Waiter, but there's also plenty of softwares out there, and I can name at least two, that allow the restaurant to go in and say what their seasonal menu is going to be, allow the farmers to go in and say, this is what I'm planning and we'll be ready in 6 weeks. to bridge that communication barrier, to allow them to directly access what's growing, what's needed, and have it almost like in a Facebook marketplace kind of way of showing it. But these things exist, we're just not using it. We don't have to recreate softwares or make some small farmer have a relationship with 15 farms. These softwares exist, we just need to use them to a large extent.
I prefer, speaking from my own work experience, I prefer growing a personal relationship with people from whom I'm buying. We briefly touched on like the backdoor deals where they just show up and they have 6.5 pounds of tomatoes. They're lovely, but like I don't know what their garden looks like. I never saw them before.
But that's what we do. We give you the transparency of knowing exactly what farm it is, and you have all of that. You just don't have to deal with every single farmer, and the farmer doesn't have to deal with every single restaurant. It bridges this gap that we're saying is a huge barrier with technology. You still have the transparency. It's extremely important to have the transparency, and we know where the farmers are and where food comes from.
But when I see the farmer at Rouse's, I'm gonna be like, "Hey, Margie, what's up?" Or am I gonna be like, "Oh, she looks friendly," and just continue down the aisle? The personal relationship, speaking from a local restaurant where we're blessed to be in a city where almost everyone can cook well. So if you can be successful cooking in a restaurant in Lafayette or a number of other cities in the South, but particularly Lafayette, everyone here can cook almost exclusively great food. So if you can be successful in that, then everything around you has to continue to level up all the time. And those personal relationships, when I'm talking to my guests at the table and I'm telling them about the kohlrabi that we treated 3 different ways, we've got a puree, a roast, a shaved raw salad on top. I also might want to mention that Margie grew kohlrabi specifically for us. We talked about it like 6 months ago, and I don't see how I would get that same connection with a farmer or a provider via an app.
The software does that.
Sure.
I also want to add that how we've managed to connect with the few farms that do produce enough food to kind of sustain a menu, because there aren't very many that give you staples like celery and onions and garlic and potatoes and stuff like that here. We just base it on what they're already doing. So we aren't in control all of the time of that. We don't write a menu and expect it to be out there in the world. It's just, we go and we'll take it all. We lay it out, we put together a dish, and we know that's going to be in season for however many weeks. We know when lettuce is going, we know when certain things are coming in. And then that way the farmer can do what they do, and we can do what we do, and it's just synchronistic. And it's very creative because no one's expecting anything of each other, and they can just live their separate lives together and co-create beautiful things.
Any other questions in the audience?
I was wondering, especially thinking about that model that you're speaking of for Scratch Farm Kitchen, did you start off with that, or did that evolve? I know that you were in the restaurant industry before you came as connected to the local food scene as you are now. So what was that evolution from I make a menu and then I find the food for it to I find the food and then I make a menu out of it?
For me, during my end at St. Street, when I first began meeting Jamie, and she was really connected on the farmer's end, and what I was experiencing was an awakening of how blind I was to what food really was and where it came from and the importance of it in community, which she was definitely educating me on. I was more into learning what she already knew. So when I met her, we formed a relationship off of, she's like, this is what you do. I grow food, I cook it. And so, yeah, we just always did that. And in my time in restaurants, it was always very ego-driven. There wasn't a lot of education about local food. I don't think local food ever came up at kitchens unless it was St. Street, which I worked, and a few others just, it wasn't their mindset. Their mindset was more of making money, being fast, being on time, having a certain look, having a certain vibe. Maybe they just did weddings, but nothing was local at all, and it was never an issue, so. I don't know why it just feels so good. I mean, I think that's the question. People are like, why do it? Why would you want to do that? Why don't you just go to the store? It baffles people, I think.
I feel like that's a little bit something we touched on yesterday evening. Also, there was a great panel between restaurateurs and some farmers. We'll hope to have that again one day because it was great and rewarding. And we talked about how some restaurants that have seasonal menus are getting hip to the idea that if they keep the language a little bit vague, they can accommodate those like mid-season changes, whatever this one plant didn't do well this year, but we have a lot of this, and they're able to make more like emergency changes while also running kind of a season-long menu. So it's kind of bridging the gap between the pure food and that business manufacturing model where it's fast and all of that. So there is kind of hopefully going to continue to be room for everybody at the table, whether you're buying large amounts, small amounts, or lots of amounts. Let's see. I have next steps as one of my cues here on my little guide. So what would be the next steps? How, and this is something I'm curious about also, how do farmers go into restaurants that do not currently have a local food agenda or passion, and how do you guys say hi? Do you identify like, hey, you use a lot of basil, I grow a lot of basil?
I think that customers need to make them friendly places for us to begin with by asking about local food on menus. That'll be a big thing. Unfortunately, like the system that we are living under is that we have to show a financial incentive to buying local food right now. We know that there is an economic benefit to buying local food. When food is bought from local farms, there's an economic multiplier of 1.2. When it's bought from farms that are elsewhere, the economic multiplier is like 1.6, which we know means a loss to our local dollars. So if you're going into a restaurant and you're asking about what farms the food comes from, even if the answer is the food comes from no local farms, then maybe that'll get to the chef, and if that continues to happen, then the chef will see an imperative to buying local food, and then when someone like Allison or I knocks on somebody's back door, they'll be like, oh, I've been looking for someone who had basil for a while, or they'll put out the word. So, we knock a lot of doors when farms are starting, but also at some point you have to feel like a place is gonna be open to you selling product there. You can't cold call all the time. So customers are a big part of that, I think.
I want to build on that and go back to John's presentation just before this. That's a perfect example of an individual policy. When you are eating, talk to, it can be a conversation with a waiter, but make your case known and let the restaurant know that you care about where the food comes from, because those policies, like John said, start at the individual level, and no one's going to make changes unless people voice those opinions. And we struggle to make these connections between the farmer and the restaurant, the farmer and the consumer, whatever it is, but a lot of it comes down to thinking less about those specific connections and more about the bigger picture of the food system. That systems perspective is really, really important in this realm, and it's something that's not really understood, and it's really messy and it's difficult, but we have to kind of keep that in mind.
Awesome. Thank you so much, farmers, for doing what you guys do. Any farmers out here, livestock producers, of course, included, thank you so much for what you guys do. Also, just to reiterate some of the great ideas we had in this panel here, restaurant CSAs. I think that's going to, I think that's great. And then, you know, something else we talked about yesterday in the panel was chefs who can utilize the full product. Specifically, we were talking about watermelon and how a couple of rows of watermelon can yield like, woo-hoo, some watermelon. And the restaurant has said, I want all your watermelon. And then they see how much watermelon that is, and they're like, what have I done? And in addition to, of course, eating the delicious flesh, restaurants can pickle the rind, and so I feel like maybe that could also, if y'all are interested in like more teaching, I know farmers do a lot of teaching just in their day-to-day, getting through. But these chefs who don't know yet, you can be like, there are, you know, ways to make it more cost-effective for you, make it okay for you to pay this premium price because we're doing all of the organic, biodiversified growing methods, even though you can't afford to get the USDA, whatever. And for them to be able to support, they need to know how to really wring every single piece of usage out of that, because after the rind pickles are gone, you still have that vinegar, you can shrub that out, and so on and so forth, and like really move that product forward through I guess the line of succession from fresh on a plate to compost. And I know a lot of operations, certainly here in town, do not do all of that. I was blessed and got to hang out with the Scratch Farm ladies one day, and everything that wasn't in the bowl to get cooked or eaten raw went into compost, going home to feed the pigs. And it was all like great organic stuff. So there's just so much more education. I feel like we'll just all be growing and growing and growing, and trying to get more people to see that it's doable and you can make it cost effective at a number of volume levels.
Can I say one more thing that I don't know if we drilled home?
Sure.
Which is that I want to make sure that we're all aware that there aren't enough producers, too.
Yeah.
And I think that that's something that I think that we talk about it so much internally that I'm realizing maybe we don't actually say it enough externally, that there are not enough people producing food, and that when we are struggling for our businesses to be able to sell to restaurants, it's because as farmers, we cannot create enough of an economy for local food because we do not have enough of a showing of local food. So I work with flower farmers, and we work collectively to build a flower economy and show that there is enough local flowers that when you want to have a wedding, you can find local flowers and there will be enough. Because we know that if somebody decides they want to get local flowers and then they go out to find them and they can't find them, then we've lost that opportunity to have that customer forever. We have a gap right now in people relying on the food that they're eating every day coming from local farms, and they don't believe that that could ever happen because we don't show them that it ever could. So we will never, like vegetable producing farmers in Louisiana, I cannot see a time in our lifetime where there will ever be actual competition. Because right now, the amount of food that we eat that's not coming from our state, we couldn't produce it if we all started farming. If everybody in this room started farming 20 acres tomorrow and kept farming and did a really good job and had enough capital to start that farm, we wouldn't have enough food to feed this state. So supporting new producers and supporting organizations that support new producers and supporting farms that support new producers and supporting other food businesses that buy things like local grains and buy things like local meat and buy the things that make a really robust food system. I am on a bully pulpit right now. I'm going to stop.
Great, great,
Okay.
amen. Thanks so much for coming out, y'all. You got something? Did I see your hand go up? Do you want me to run you a mic? No, look out, I'm Oprah. I've been waiting to be Oprah all day.
Thank you. I was just wondering about the role of farmers markets in connecting chefs and farmers, because a lot of the conversation so far about that connection has been the backdoor deal where farmers go to the restaurant, deliver the food, or what exactly that transaction happens. But what about farmers markets? And I know the scale can be different, but what's that role and what's that interplay?
Farmers markets can be a tremendous resource for something like that. And I'm speaking from the perspective of Central Louisiana, which is very rural and not the same as Lafayette, New Orleans, but I think the idea is still the same, particularly if you're talking to a chef or a restaurant owner who isn't savvy with seasonality and the local food world, because we've had experiences where we've talked to people who are just making food purchases for schools, for example. And we said, why don't you come to our farmers market and we'll show you what's in season. And they came with a list of very not in season things, thinking that that's what they were going to find. And it was a very eye-opening experience just for them to see, oh, this is what local food looks like. You know, so I think that can be a tremendous educational experience.
Yeah, I think farmers markets can play a huge role. As I was saying, that's how we started. You know, you don't have any, you don't have pressure on what people think that you're gonna have, which is nice. I would also say if you have any power on a farmers market thing, I would say if somebody grows it, they should be there. I think that oftentimes I see that there's some kind of control that farmers markets like to have, like, oh, we need 2 meat producers, we need 4 vegetable producers, we need 1 dairy person. I think that is such a great entry point for a producer to be at a market. Like, if you have any pull in a market, I love producer-only markets. I think that should be a rule, but I think there should be less like trying to get the perfect ratio, more give people the opportunity. And oftentimes those chefs that are really about it, they'll come to you and they'll find you there, and it's a great way to build a relationship.
I just wanted to, as an example of showing leadership, I just want to recognize Margie Green for putting her hat in the name for Agricultural Commissioner. So thank you for doing that.
All right, thank you, Grant. All right, and thank you to all of our wonderful panelists. It was really great, and I'm just going to say I really enjoyed this female powerful panel. Shout out for that.